All right, everybody, let's jump in. Welcome today to today's Chamber Connect. I am Cecilia Harry. I am Chief Economic Development Officer here at the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC, and I'm very pleased to welcome you today. We have a special series that is getting started today called Talent Takeover. And so over the next couple of months, we're going to have some Chamber Connect topics specifically about talent and workforce related issues. And it's not too hard to see why this is such an important issue for us as a business community. As the Chamber and EDC, there really is no industry represented in the Pikes Peak region that doesn't need more workers. I've not run into one business or one industry that says, yep, perfectly good on workers, don't need any more. Everyone's concerned about it. They're worried about who they're going to hire today. They're worried about who they're going to hire in 2 months, 2 years, etc. And so this is a really important issue for all of us as employers. And then on the flip side there from the supply area, most of us are employees of employers. And so to better understand what resources are out there, to better engage the workforce overall, not only helps us as employers, but also helps us as humans when we or loved ones are looking for that next employment opportunity. So very glad that you are joining us today on this very important topic, and encourage you to join us on future talent takeovers. There's a special logo that designates a talent takeover topic. And the next part of the series will be on March 2nd. We will have the Pikes Peak Workforce Center here with the topic of 5 problems that your workforce center can solve for your business. I want to give a special shout out to some far away attendees today. We have some folks from the Ashland, Ohio area chamber joining us. Hello, fellow chamber friends. We're excited you're here. Our understanding is that you were doing some searching for how to better engage on early childhood education issues with your community, and you found this event. So we're so glad that you're here, and we're so grateful that it's in a platform that allows you to join us. So welcome and hello from Colorado. So we'll start with introductions here shortly. And before we turn it over to our panelists, we do have some time built in at the end for questions of our panel. So when you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat feature, and staff will pay attention to that. And when we get to that part of the programming, we will have those questions set up to ask our panelists and to have a nice virtual discussion there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have 3 different presenters today. Our first panelist is Kelly Hurtado, and she is the Early Childhood Program Director, Joint Initiatives for Youth and Families. So thank you for joining us, Kelly. And after Kelly, we'll have Nicole Reel. She is President and CEO of Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, also known as EPIC. Thank you for being here as well, Nicole. And then to bring it home and do a great call to action for us local employers, we have Diane Price. She is President and CEO of Early Connections Learning Centers here in Colorado Springs. And thank you, Diane, for all that you did to coordinate today. So without further ado, let's jump in and let's hear from Kelly.
Hello, everybody. Bear with me a second while I share my screen. It is wonderful to be here today. I am Kelly Hurtado from Joint Initiatives, Alliance for Kids. We house the Early Childhood Council for El Paso County. We are a system buildings entity working to educate our community about the importance of the early years. We work to increase quality by supporting childcare programs. We support families with resources needed to successfully navigate the first years in their child's life. And we build partnerships within our community to make El Paso County the best place to raise a child. I want to start off by providing you with a bit of economic history related to childcare. Childcare was created in the United States in response to World War II, when we needed a place for children to be cared for while women entered the workforce to fill roles in the production lines. It was as close to a fully funded childcare program as we have ever seen in the United States. Now, the US is one of the only developing countries that does not have free care for children. It is funded a bit by government and largely by families paying tuition, which results in very small profit margins and a child care funding formula that just doesn't add up. The cost of childcare has roughly tripled since 1990, which is more than the average rate of inflation. The average cost for childcare is now $25,000 a year for households, which is more than housing costs and college tuition. Parents staying out of the workforce impacts our local economy through lost productivity. So clearly, increased access to high quality childcare is not just a benefit to families, but a benefit to our local economy. It's a win-win for all of us. The picture that I've painted shows that childcare was a problem prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and unfortunately, the landscape did not improve over this past year. As a council, we've been tracking program closure data since March, and I'm happy to report that we have only seen about a 7% loss of childcare businesses throughout the pandemic locally. However, that equates to 200 spots for children that are no longer available to families that rely on this care in our community. This isn't over yet either. The fiscal impact to these businesses continues. Early Milestones Colorado just released new localized data. And as you can see, childcare programs continue to experience impacts of reduced enrollment and temporary closure due to COVID-19. Additionally, 64% of businesses who were surveyed reported that they can only continue operations with current enrollment for less than a year. These business owners are making monthly decisions about whether or not they can keep their doors open to continue serving families in our community. Over 50% of the businesses surveyed saw an average monthly revenue decrease of over 25%. Remember that this is for childcare businesses who cannot simply charge families more than they are currently charging, as families can't afford it, especially in these times. Over 70% of childcare business owners stated that they needed at least an additional $1,000 a month to achieve pre-pandemic revenue levels, with 20% needing over $4,000 monthly. In the summer of 2020, Alliance for Kids surveyed El Paso County families to understand how the pandemic impacted their need for childcare, their desire to return children to care, and how the various school learning scenarios impacted their childcare needs. We really wanted to understand how the pandemic was impacting local supply and demand of childcare. What we found was that 60% of the 1,200 families surveyed utilized care prior to the pandemic. 48% anticipated needing care in the near future, and 34% stated that they were unsure of what their needs were going to be. What really rose to the top, however, is that 49% of these surveyed participants stated that they would not be able to return to work without childcare. What we're hearing anecdotally from families is that without access to affordable, licensed care, they're left with very difficult decisions. Do they quit their job to stay home and care for their children? Do they leave children in more of an informal care setting with maybe a friend, family, or neighbor? Or, and this plays out more often than you may think, do they leave a teen or preteen home with the responsibility of caring for their younger siblings? The bottom line is that families need access to childcare, and our children are our future workforce. So it makes sense for us to partner to create a path forward. As an industry, we know that we are going to have to pivot to meet the needs of families and businesses as we work to rebuild our local economy. There are grants in the works that may fund some business support innovations, and as the Early Childhood Council, we are more than happy to provide data, technical assistance, brainstorming, etc., as needs arise for businesses and employees. So please reach out. I will put my contact information in the chat, and I look forward to connecting in the future. At this point in time, I am going to pass this off to my colleague, Nicole Reel, with Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, who will take it from here.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. And hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Reel, and it's great to be here today. So thank you so much for having me. I am going to share my screen now and get to our new slideshow here. All right, there we go. All right, so thanks again for having me. And EPIC is an organization, it's a nonprofit organization that has been here in Colorado for the past 11 years. We were founded by a group of business executives who felt like there needed to be an organization that could represent the business community's voice when it came to supporting early childhood education and those priorities in our state. And why is that? It's because we know that early childhood education and early childhood services in general are key to developing our future workforce here in Colorado while making sure that we can attract and retain a great current workforce. So thinking about the future workforce, I always say that economic development begins with early childhood development, and it's absolutely true. We know now from brain research that's been done in this country that the first 5 years of a child's brain development is really where all of that development and magic is happening. Former statistics said that about 90% of the brain development happens in the first 5 years of life. And now we know that every single second, there are about 1 million neural connections being made in a child's brain. So this is actually my daughter. She's actually in first grade now, but it always works as a nice, cute picture for our slideshows. And so really, we know that this is a critically important time frame to impact a child's trajectory, both in terms of their future educational success, but also in terms of their future economic and career success. So if we want a fantastic workforce for Colorado 10, 15, 20 years down the road, it begins right now with our youngest children. We also know that children who have quality early childhood experiences have an increase in graduation levels. They're more likely to achieve self-sufficiency as an adult and economic mobility in their careers. And we know that overall, there's also going to be a decrease in things like reliance on public assistance or even incarceration. And if we think that getting to children in kindergarten or even in their year before kindergarten is soon enough, we have actually missed the greatest window of a child's life to impact their trajectory for many, many years to come. Here are some statistics around the current workforce in El Paso County. We know that El Paso County has a workforce participation of roughly 67%, which is pretty close to the state average here in Colorado. We also, of course, know that top industries include government, which, of course, military is a big part of. About 20% of your workforce in El Paso County is in the government services sector. Education and health services, also very large portions, followed up by professional services. So lots of families across the spectrum there. 274,000 households and 47,000 children under age 5. But what we also know is that El Paso County only has 16,500 licensed childcare slots for children under age 5 in 443 programs. Now, if we look at the amount of children, typically that 67% is a pretty close number to the children who have all available parents in their household participating in the workforce. That's a lot of children who need childcare because the families and the parents are in the workforce and not enough childcare to begin with. So this has really been an issue for our state for over a decade. The pandemic has really, though, shown a very bright light on this issue and really called a lot of attention to it, because with schools closing and families really struggling to find childcare or provide coverage for their children, this has become much more front and center. But the reality is that in our state of Colorado here and in certain areas like El Paso and Colorado Springs, we have seen tremendous growth in our population. We've seen huge growth in our workforce participation, and yet our childcare access and our slots overall has declined over the past decade. We've lost hundreds of family childcare homes, and we've seen the capacity at childcare centers decline in many cases as well. And as Kelly mentioned, we have really expensive childcare in Colorado, the 8th highest cost of childcare in the United States right now. So over $15,000 a year for one infant and $27,000 a year for 2 children on average. And Colorado Springs area is really close to that average and actually a little bit above it. So lots of money that families are paying for childcare here. How does this boil down to our economic impact on the business community and our economy overall? The Council for a Strong America did a study about 2 years ago to look at the economic impact of the infant and toddler childcare shortage we have here in the state of Colorado. Statewide, it's about a $2.2 billion impact in lost earnings, productivity, and revenue for Colorado. Now, if we look at the GDP numbers for El Paso County in comparison to the GDP of the entire state, this equates to about $213 million lost for El Paso County. Alternatively, they also found that employers lose about $680 million a year due to this issue. And again, if we look at that based on GDP, that's about $65 million lost in El Paso County. And this is, loss of productivity and challenges internal to companies around childcare issues. And we also know that in that study, about 80% of families reported that they had adverse impacts on their efforts or commitments at work due to childcare problems. So this is an issue that has long been in place for families across Colorado, but unfortunately the pandemic has made that even worse. So what can you as a business leader or as an employer do about this? I really boil this down into a couple of different categories because we know that every business is different. We have small businesses and large businesses alike on this call. And we also have businesses from various industries, some of which have been hit significantly during this pandemic and are not in a position to contribute to childcare supports financially, and others who may be able to. So we're going to look at different options here that companies can really consider based on what their current situation is. The first category is what I would call internal quick wins. And this is really thinking about your culture, your policies, and your procedures as an employer internal to your organization. First off, and I know this is something we've all heard, but schedule flexibility and remote work if it's possible. We know that a lot of individuals do work in service-related industries, and that's not always possible, but as much as companies can give that flexibility to employees and make sure that remote work options or even shift sharing or things like that are available, it's a huge help to working families. Open conversations and normalizing a supportive culture for working families is also really critically important. Before this pandemic, an employee may have had to bring their child into work with an emergency, or you may have had a child pop into a Zoom call. And for some business leaders or cultures or work environments, that would have been considered a little bit taboo. But now this pandemic has really changed how we see those things. We see people's children and pets in Zoom calls all the time, and we know that families are juggling a multitude of priorities. As much as company leaders can model and normalize that, it will really help with the culture internally so that managers also know it's okay if people need to move a meeting around to accommodate virtual learning for a child or need to make accommodations for that. Predictability and consistent communications with employees, again, as much as they can plan ahead of time. And I know this firsthand because I have a first grader who has been virtually learning for the vast majority of the year. Planning is key, and knowing what you're expected to do and when you need to do it is really key to making sure you can juggle all of these priorities that are happening for working families at the same time. So as much lead time as you can give employees internally around upcoming meetings, making those meetings consistent and not having them changed. Sometimes those quote unquote stand-up huddles or things that get called together really quickly can be a challenge for working families. And really making sure that it's very clear to employees that if they do need to make adjustments to their schedule, or they do need to ask their manager for changes around remote working or flexibility, that's not going to impact their performance reviews down the road. We've found in studies that a lot of employees really have a lot of concern about that, and they're not quite sure that the company may say that they offer flexibility and that they can work remotely, but their direct manager may not be such a big fan of that. And so working parents may be really nervous or concerned about actually asking for those accommodations because they might be worried that it can impact their performance review down the road. And lastly, seek employee feedback and ideas around this. Depending on the sector that you're in and the industry and the type of jobs that are in your organization, employees might have different challenges and different ideas on how to really meet their childcare and needs for their family. In a recent U.S. Chamber of Commerce study that was done, close to 80% of employers reported that they knew childcare was an issue for their employees, but only 13% of them did any sort of formal feedback mechanism each year to actually ask for feedback and ideas from employees directly around that. So we know that a lot of that information is really coming through informal communication networks and through managers and structures like that. Next is internal investments. And some companies are certainly in the position to actually look at making investments, financial investments internally for their own organization. Paid family leave is a big one. Some companies can do it and others can't, but we do know that Colorado has this coming down the pike due to a recent ballot initiative that was passed. And so that's something that our state as a whole is working on. But if you can offer it as an employer, both for men and women and for different types of caregiving needs, it's a huge benefit to employees. Backup care services, if they have childcare arrangements fall through. Childcare subsidies for employees, either direct stipends or via community sites. So you could work with a local community site to contract for slots that could be available to your employees on an as needed basis, or you could actually provide direct subsidies to employees to help with that. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. It could be a percentage or even a smaller amount. And lastly, on-site, not on-site, on-site childcare solutions for employees. I think I saw that we have the USAA childcare facility on the call today, and that's a great example. So some companies have gone so far as to create on-site childcare for their employees because they have a large enough workforce, and that's really what works well for them. Many companies are not in that position, and that's okay. But if that's something that is something you can do, it's a great solution for employees. And as companies are thinking about how to bring their workforce back to the office after this pandemic, you know, a lot of us think that childcare is going to play a bigger role in that, depending on what it looks like, how many days a week do employees come back to the office, and how do they juggle childcare. It could be an amenity and an on-site benefit that could become even more important to employees as they consider what work looks like after this pandemic. And lastly, we have community investments and advocacy that can be done by the business community. So first off, addressing local barriers to entry and cultivating childcare businesses. This is a regulated industry and it can be really difficult for individuals to enter into the childcare business. The tenant improvement and capital build out of a childcare facility is very expensive. It can be difficult to find locations, and there are some, different regulatory pieces that you need to get through there. I think the early childhood councils across the state of Colorado have done a great job of really working collaboratively with local partners to identify some of these barriers. So they're a great partner to connect to if you want to hear from them directly. What are some of those big challenges for individuals who want to get into the childcare business and find themselves really struggling with that? Because we really need employers to be part of the supply solution here. We know that we do not have anywhere close to the amount of childcare that we need in Colorado. So we need to create supply and we need to make it more affordable. Secondly, we have universal preschool being implemented in Colorado as a result of Proposition EE being passed on the November ballot by Colorado voters. And so we need the business community to be advocates and really advocate for the implementation of universal preschool being done in a way that supports working families and really make sure that we can have broad reach and access to preschool for working families. So some families do want to use a family childcare home for their child's preschool experience, or they need to find a program that suits their working hours better than a traditional public school. So we want to make sure those options and choices are widely available. EPIC's going to be working very hard at the state capitol this year to really be a strong advocate for that, and we'll be looking for business partners to sign on in support of that work as well. And lastly, there are employer childcare consortium models that have started to really model out across the country and in other countries across the world, which really takes into account that many employers want to be part of the childcare solution, but the risk and the cost associated with opening an entire childcare facility on their own with one company is often just deemed to be too much. And so in many cases, small to mid-market companies are interested in investing in childcare, but they can't do it alone. And so we have been working with organizations like the Summit Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Denver Partnership, to really think about what a consortium or a co-op type model could look like for multiple employers who want to open childcare together. So that you could have maybe 5 or 6 employers that create a co-op or a nonprofit board that operates childcare in partnership with a tenured and experienced childcare operator in the local community, and actually mitigates some of that cost and risk while allowing them to create access to childcare for their employees. So those are all great options to look at. And I expect that Diane will probably talk about some of these a little bit more. A couple other resources I just wanted to put out there. EPIC does have an employer toolkit on our website. It's coloradoepic.org. And for our EPIC members, we have members from all across the state who are business leaders and executives who really care about early childhood and want to lend their voice and their expertise and their influence to this important issue. We also offer some workplace support, technical assistance, and consulting for our EPIC members. So we've actually been working with one of our EPIC members in the Denver area on creating their own on-site childcare facility, and that is expected to open next month. And then also the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation just released a really great executive briefing that talks about essential care for essential workers. And again, is a little bit of a roadmap in talking about how employers can implement some of these resources for their own employees. The one additional note I wanted to make is that we have a lot of support right now at the state capitol, both in our legislatures, but also with Governor Polis around this issue. I think they all really deeply understand how challenging childcare has been for the workforce. And one of the supplemental budget requests that has been put forward to the Joint Budget Committee is a $5 million grant program that would support employer-sponsored on-site or near-site childcare projects. So again, that's something that EPIC will be advocating very strongly for at the state capitol, but it would also create new resources so that if employers are interested in looking at solutions in their local community and really helping to address this supply issue we have across the state, that there will be grants available up to $500,000 to support those types of projects. And it could be groups of employers, it could be a combination of employers and community members. So there's lots of different ways to structure that. All right, well, I'm going to hand it over to Diane, who is your local subject matter expert and amazing leader in the early childhood community in El Paso. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Kelly. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. We've heard a lot of data. We've heard a lot of information about what's happened during the past year with childcare, what opportunities we have in our communities and in our state to invest in childcare. I think the most important thing that I see today is that the Chamber is stepping forward and taking a leadership role in helping you all think about how best we can support your workforce. I don't think there's ever been a more critical time than right now for us to think about how we get people back to work, how we help support families, how we help support our economic development in our communities. And we see childcare as a strategy that will help communities grow and help communities get back on task. I hope what you heard today was an opportunity to partner. There are leaders in this community that have embraced early care and education in childcare. There are those of us in the profession of childcare that want to step forward and partner with you all in coming up with solutions, coming up with strategies, investing in your employees, investing in our community, and making sure that we create the best solutions and opportunities for your kind of business. As you heard from Nicole's presentation, there are so many options and so many things for us to try. And we want to be creative. We want to step out of our boxes. I've been thinking a lot over the last year about the changing landscape of childcare. We have typically been traditional 6:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, family childcare homes doing childcare in the evenings and on weekends. Very seldom do centers do that. That's not going to be the needs of our workforce in the future. We're going to have to think about families who are working remotely and the fact that they may need some time, a couple of days a week, where they have a childcare situation for their children. And we, as the early care and education community and the childcare providers in our community have to think about how to partner with you and how to think about being creative. And so I urge you, and I urge the chamber to embrace this time and this opportunity we have right now. Challenge us as providers to think differently about how we do business so that we can support your workforce. Challenge us to change our mindsets about what the needs are of the workforce issues, and think about what it means to have a fully engaged employee workforce at your business that feels satisfied with their jobs, feels comfortable with the company and the culture, and knows that their children are well cared for, and that there is that opportunity for children to grow and for parents to be able to go to work every day. We all want the same things for our employees and for our families and for our children. We want them to have a better life. We want them to be satisfied when they come to their jobs. And so this is an opportunity for us to step forward and think differently about how we do business. So I encourage you to reach out to us, reach out to the Alliance for.
Sorry, Diane, you're muted.
Yeah, somebody muted me. Sorry, that's okay. You've heard today, Alliance for Kids, Joint Initiative Alliance Kids is here in our community locally, thinking about what we can do to promote early care and education. Nicole represents an incredible organization at the state level that really wants to engage businesses. And this is an opportunity for us to partner with them and think about how we can promote and push forward this agenda right now. And I also think that it's important for you to reach out to the providers in this community that want to partner with you, that have stepped up to take a leadership role, and think about how you can challenge them to meet the needs of your employees. So with that, I hope we can have some questions, some conversation, an opportunity for us to think a little bit about how we might do some things differently in El Paso County, Colorado Springs.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks, Kelly and Nicole. We do have some questions from the chat, and if anybody else has questions, it looks like we do have quite a bit of time, so please post them in there and I will ask them. First, I wanted to announce that we have a raffle winner we picked today, and it's Judy Kaltenbacher of Stockman Cast Ryan. If you could send me your email address, I can get you that raffle item, which is a gift card, in the mail. So congratulations. The first question is for Nicole. Why is Colorado's childcare cost so much higher than in other states?
Well, there's not a super easy answer to that question, but I can certainly tell you that there is a trend across the country that areas with higher costs, that higher real estate expenses and higher taxes also tend to see higher childcare expense rates. And so as we all know, Colorado has gotten much more expensive when it comes to real estate. We also have fairly high commercial property tax expenses here in Colorado, and the majority of early care and education childcare businesses actually do pay those types of taxes as well. So that all really feeds into the equation. I will say too that, quality costs money, and we certainly have a great community of childcare businesses and providers here in Colorado who are very dedicated to making sure that they are trying to hire the best educators to work with children and providing quality environments, but that's also very expensive as well. So, one of the things that we want to do through EPIC is to really think about ways that we can address some of those higher expense items in the childcare business equation to bring those rates down for families, and also make sure that our childcare businesses can pay our early education professionals the way they should be paid for the great care they're providing to children. So we are looking currently into solutions around more affordable real estate options for childcare. We are looking into solutions around tax exemptions and ways to provide some relief on the back end of that business equation.
Thank you, Nicole. The next question is, can you speak to what childcare issues might look like for employees when they are in crisis? What are some family-friendly policies to have in place to help reduce childcare challenges? And Diane, perhaps you could pass that question off to one of the panelists.
I think there were some, I'll address first and then anyone else, please just jump in. But I think there are some opportunities that you saw, some solutions that you saw in Nicole's presentation, backup childcare, contracts with childcare centers for some spaces that can be used in an emergency or used for some purpose. We have Early Connections has a Get Well Center. It's part of our the Day Nursery's original building. And for a time, the Gazette contracted with us for children who were mildly ill. And the employees who had children who were sick could come to our center and be in our Get Well Center so that those parents could go to work. And I say mildly ill, you know, we're talking about stuff that just keeps the child kind of wanting to be quiet and lay and rest, those kinds of things. There are ways to think about how to partner with sites, with childcare centers in your neighborhoods or around your businesses. I also think thinking about ways to, we as a profession are thinking about shared services and how we can bring a group of providers together. We have a network of family childcare homes. Reaching out through models like that, where you might have that ability to say, you know, we have 12 family childcare homes and they have space available on a drop-in basis for a crisis or for a backup childcare or for something like that. So again, I challenge you to challenge us to be creative, to challenge us to think differently about how we do our business. We have had to do that during this pandemic. And so I think we've become pretty experienced at thinking out of the box and thinking about how we can continue to support the workforce in our community. But Kelly or Nicole, either one of you who might have some thoughts on that, please.
The other thing I would say is that we know when families are in crisis, they really benefit from resource navigation. So they may be seeking some resources to help get their family out of crisis. And as the Early Childhood Council, we do provide that support, you know, a human to answer the phone and talk through what are the challenges, what resources do you need? And then our resource navigator is very well informed about local resources, knows the questions to ask the family and can help them find what they need. So.
And I would add that I think any good quality early care and education program would say to you, and the child care center would say to you, that we want to partner and stand shoulder to shoulder with families. So when families are in crisis, we understand that they've entrusted their children with us. And so we can listen to the concerns they have. We maintain confidentiality and we can help navigate with them also. So finding a trusted partner, finding trusted partners, around your businesses or in this community, we're out there and we want to support the families and we want to support you as businesses to be successful.
Thank you. The next question is a bit long. When K through 12 schools and workplaces operate in non-pandemic situations, the school hours often do not align with business hours and leave parents with a gap in childcare solutions in the afternoon. Beyond flexible schedules, what can businesses do to help employees who are left with a gap in childcare options between the hours of 2 and 5 p.m.?
I'll take a little bit of this one. Oftentimes, we as an organization, Early Connections, has partnerships with 2 schools that we actually do before school care and after school care. One on site at that school, and the other one, actually the school bus that we are a neighborhood site and they transport the children back and forth from our center for the parents. And so I think there's a lot of that out there. There are a lot of schools that are recognizing this and understanding the need to think about how you can create those opportunities at the school. There's a lot of school age programs, before school and after school programs, boys and girls clubs. The Y is doing a lot of this. Perhaps we don't do quite as well about marketing and getting that information out to you as we should. But I think in partnership with the chamber and in partnership with you, tell us what you need, tell us how we need to get these messages out. We are very interested in supporting the needs of our community as early care and education professionals. And so there are childcare centers out there and family childcare homes that are willing to think about how we can work with businesses, how we can work with families in different kinds of ways. What's been traditional is no longer, we can't even think about traditional anymore. We have to think about how we can create new solutions to the needs of working families. You know, the other thing is call your school principal. I mean, you know, and ask your school principal, have they thought about this? Are they thinking about before and after school care? Have they thought about partnering with a child care organization? Put some pressure on as parents to our schools about how do we meet the needs of families during these off hours, and how do we think about the support of our children, because we're looking at a comprehensive way of supporting families. We're looking at, you know, when we do before and after, we're doing homework support, we're doing snacks, we're helping children meet their social emotional needs, their educational needs in that time frame. And I think schools understand that we all need to be working together, particularly now. This is an interesting time for us to think about how we can partner in different kinds of ways.
So this is kind of the opposite of that question. Now, many of our retail and hospitality workers are needing childcare outside of 8 to 5 business hours. Are there any ideas on how we could approach this need?
So I mentioned earlier that family childcare homes have been, and probably will continue to be, the biggest resource for families around evening care and weekend care. We have gotten calls from time to time, someone saying, you know, our employees want to have care in the evenings, they want to have it at night. We got one of these for one of our centers once over on the southeast side of Colorado Springs, and I said, okay. And so, you know, we talked about what that meant when they went back and talked to their employees. That really wasn't what they wanted. They didn't want their children on cots and picking them up at 11 o'clock at night out of a childcare center. We also want to support families in their choice. We know that parents know what's best for their children, and creating those kinds of solutions. We are going to have to be creative. We are going to have to think about this. But as Nicole mentioned and Kelly mentioned, we have lost a lot of family childcare home providers in our state in the last year, and before that. We've had a lot of a downturn in family childcare homes, and those are licensed homes that can have typically 6 children plus 2 children that are before and after, can take care of their own children. There are a lot of efforts around the state right now to help increase capacity through family childcare homes and startups. The Alliance for Kids does pre-licensing training for people that are interested in going into this. And this is certainly an area where I think that we have an opportunity to build capacity around this need for weekend care and evening care. It's always been there. It will always be there. And we have to think about how we do that. And maybe it's through family childcare, maybe it's through small micro centers. There are a lot of ideas that are being talked about around our country. Most of us that are in the field have been doing a lot of research on that and thinking about how we may be able to partner and try some things differently. And so if you have those ideas and you have those needs, I would suggest you reach out to Kelly at Alliance for Kids. She's in contact with all the providers in the community. Most of us are intimately involved in the work that Alliance for Kids is doing, and we all want to provide successful and good options for you as employers.
Yeah, and I would echo that. You know, family childcare homes are really critical for those evening, weekend hours, overnight care that families want. And they oftentimes prefer family childcare homes because it feels more homey if your child's going to be sleeping there, right? It's a more of a one-on-one caregiving relationship. Sometimes cultural or language aspects come into play there. I will note that one of the things EPIC is working on this year is legislation to address some of the challenges we've heard about with respect to family childcare homes. So over the past about decade, a lot of municipalities and counties have adopted the new Uniform International Building Code, which has been a wonderful thing for the building industry in general, but it has had some unintended consequences to family childcare homes, namely that the International Building Code treats most family childcare homes like a large commercial business. So they're being expected to have a lot of the life-saving systems in their homes that you would find in like a 7-Eleven or a large, big commercial building down the road. Things like sprinkler systems in their homes or extra doorways for egress. And it's really cost prohibitive, obviously, for someone to put a $35,000 sprinkler system into their home. And so we are working on some legislation this year in Colorado that will help define family childcare homes in state statute so that it really helps our building departments apply the right building codes to these family childcare homes. So we aren't really creating a huge barrier to entry for that industry either.
If these are things as businesses that you that resonate with you in terms of support, these are opportunities for us to join together to advocate for some of the changes that we might be able to do around providing alternative kinds of support and services, alternative kinds of care, rather than the typical 6 to 6 kind of childcare centers. And we all recognize that policy and advocacy are critical, and we have avenues to do that. And partnering with the chamber around some of those things, or some of you as businesses through the chamber, is an opportunity for us to think about doing business differently.
Yeah, this seems like it's more important than ever to have some of those legislative policies in place, and appreciate you guys talking about that stuff. This question is that of the 7% of childcare businesses that have closed, are they disproportionately providers that are more affordable?
Not necessarily. So what we have seen is that, this really, right off the bat, the pandemic did impact programs who had less of that revenue buffer immediately within the first few weeks, within the first couple months. But then over time, what we saw was impact of lower enrollment, really impacting early childhood programs' ability to stay open. And we often saw that more in communities that were well off, where maybe both parents had been working but could afford to have one stay home. They kept the child home. Enrollment in that local child care program went down, forcing them to shut their doors. So it has not, that's not necessarily the scenario that's played out. And I wouldn't say that there has been anybody that's been safe from it either. So yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any good examples of employer childcare consortiums that have formed and have been able to work with an experienced care provider to provide a shared center for their employees?
So I can take that one. There aren't any examples in Colorado right now, but this is something that both the Downtown Denver Partnership and the Summit County Chamber of Commerce are interested in really prototyping out and looking at ways to do this in their own local communities and with business partners. Other childcare providers, for example, Bright Horizons has done this with other companies I know. But of course, they have a pretty, turnkey model that they offer. And I know a lot of our businesses here in Colorado are really interested in finding really local, experienced, high quality childcare providers to work with for operations. That's definitely their preference if we can figure this model out. Other countries have done, like Canada, for example, has some examples of this too, but their childcare financing system is drastically different than ours. And so it's really difficult to take those cost models and apply them to something like, the state of Colorado. So I think we have a really exciting opportunity in Colorado to be really a national leader in figuring this out. It's innovative. I mean, it's doing something new, but ultimately I think that the pandemic has certainly driven a lot of us to do things that are new and unusual, and will probably change the way we do things for, decades and years to come. So, that's something that Epic has been kind of in conversations with other business organizations on. And, I think the Colorado Springs area certainly has some great areas where we could look at options like this too.
So interestingly enough, Early Connections is in some conversations right now about this idea of a consortium kind of childcare organization. I'm not in a position to talk about in great detail, but we have been approached about this idea and thinking about how we can support a consortium of businesses in a particular area. So stay tuned. We are working closely, Early Connections is closely working with the Chamber, the Workforce Development Center on some of these ideas and keeping people in the loop on this. So watch for that. It may be happening.
So Nicole or Diane, would you speak a little bit about what type of company Bright Horizons is? Is it different than yours, Diane? I was recently talking to someone who works for T. Rowe Price, and he was telling me that they use Bright Horizons, and that's been really helpful for their company. So if somebody wants to jump into this now, could they look at a company like Bright Horizons or something similar?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know the specifics of the Bright Horizons model. Obviously, I've talked to many people at conferences and on panels through the years and presentations. This is their business model, is to go in and run programs for businesses in communities. Early Connections is a private not-for-profit. We were founded here in Colorado Springs in 1897. So our expansion and the work we've been doing has really been based on community need and people approaching us saying, we'd like to think about how we can work differently with you, and are you willing to do some things? And so that's the kind of work that we've been doing. But I think if you would talk to any early care and education program, childcare organization, they'd be willing to have those conversations at the local level about how that can work. I'm less familiar with Bright Horizons model. I think it's mostly on-site, that they would actually come in and run a program if you had on-site childcare, but Nicole probably has a lot more better feel for that than I do.
Yeah, the vast majority of their programs nationally are really on-site dedicated childcare programs for one employer. That's really their niche. And they've done a few of these consortium models, I think, out of response to interest, but primarily it's one employer and on-site childcare that they really offer most often. Colorado is one of the states where that really hasn't been something popular for their company to implement. And, as a Colorado native, I always like to think that we have this really unique independent spirit here in Colorado, and we like to go local, and we like to support and develop our local business leaders and women entrepreneurs and people who can run their own businesses here in the state. So I think that there's probably something there with respect to having such a large national turnkey model versus trying to think more local. And they do have a pretty turnkey model. It's just, you'll pay a premium for that too. So I think that there are ways that we can think about solutions in Colorado that meet the various needs of employers and companies, and it's going to be something different for every employer. So that's why we have organizations like ours to really, be partners in those conversations and help them think through solutions.
Thank you. So we have time for, I think, one more question. And that question is there any advice for how to bring this topic to the decision makers at your company to get them to consider different benefits and policies? And this is coming from the employee standpoint, talking to the decision makers.
So I have always wondered if folks that know the most about what's happening with employees and what's happening in their family needs and their childcare needs aren't the HR departments. I've always felt like that's probably a place of conversation and trust to be able to go and talk. And so I've always wondered if that wouldn't be a way to initiate some conversation about this in terms of talking with HR about the implications to individual employees, the implications of the the needs that they may have and what's interfering with their ability to be on task, in tune, not be concerned at 2 o'clock when school's out, getting the phone call that I'm home, mom, and you're saying, you know, don't use the stove, you know, don't do this, don't do that. And so perhaps it's through our HR departments, perhaps it's through HR leadership groups. I'm not exactly sure how they're organized, but I don't think there's any CEO or president of a company right now that isn't thinking about employees and how to keep their employees invested in their business and how to keep those employees satisfied with their work. It seems that turnover is an issue for everyone, people leaving jobs. And you know, I was saying the other day, I've had, you know, I'm reaching retirement, I'm close to 70. I've had 5 jobs in my entire life. And I have people that work for us that have had 5 jobs in the last month. And so thinking about how we retain staff is critical. And it isn't just in early care and education, it's in any job. So I think HR people are a place to think about, you know, if you have suggestions, start with your HR director or someone at manager level.
Yeah, HR is pretty tuned into everything, but I will also say that the willingness to invest in and or support childcare solutions also needs to come from the very top levels of any business organization. And that's one of the reasons why EPIC was created, because, you know, we want to make sure this is a priority for business executives and leaders across the state of Colorado. So, I mean, it's just as important to have that buy-in and that willingness and that support coming from that level. And I'll also just put a plug in for the fact that EPIC and the Common Sense Institute are co-releasing a report today on impacts of women in the workforce over the past year. And we have some, you know, topics around childcare in there as well. But all of the business leaders I've talked to, right, the common issue even before the pandemic was we can't find enough people. We can't find enough people. You know, we've had 20,000 women with children leave the workforce during this pandemic, enough to fill the Pepsi Center here in Colorado. It's a huge amount of women. And if Colorado is going to recover from this pandemic and build our economy back just as strong and stronger than it was, we need women in the workforce. The workforce that our employers need are, you know, our parents who are home with their children. Sometimes they want to be, but sometimes they don't. And they can't find or afford childcare. So if we can solve this issue, we can also help solve some of these workforce challenges that we know employers have as well.
Nicole, I think that's a wonderful note to end on, in the sense of what this really means for our society and for our region, and our competitiveness as a region within this society. It's not good news that women are not re-entering the workforce at the rate that they could or should be. But it's such an important statistic to get out there. And it's something we should all be thinking about, because we're not in a situation in the Pikes Peak region and Colorado and the country really to be picking and choosing who gets to re-enter the workforce. Anybody who wants to enter the workforce and contribute to the workforce should be allowed to do that. And we should be removing barriers so that people can get back to work, because when they cannot get back to work, what that does to our economy and our quality of life and the services that we're able to provide ourselves as a society suffer. And again, it also hurts our economic competitiveness when we're trying to grow the region, which is really important from an economic development strategic perspective. So thank you for that last comment, Nicole. And for those of you that will hopefully join us on future Talent Takeover subjects, you're going to hear that come up again about creating an environment where people who want to work can work, and what are those barriers, and how are we as employers part of the solution for that. So Nicole, Kelly, Diane, I cannot thank you enough for what you shared with us today. Lots to digest, lots to advocate for and weave into our work here at the Chamber and EDC. And again, thank you to all of our participants for joining us today. This concludes our program. And again, we hope to see you in a few weeks. Check our events calendar for our upcoming Chamber Connect that is scheduled for early March, also in the Talent Takeover series. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.